and we also see some sporadic outbreak of the cases. Since the second half of this week, now we have a decreasing trend of the asymptomatic carriers and the confirmed cases, which means we are seeing some effects of our control measures, and we are also implementing the measures across regions, and the situation is within our control. We are seeing higher mobility of people, and we believe there will still be some risks for people's safety, and the central government is paying high attention to people's health and safety, asking different departments to do good services and epidemic control measures during the Spring Festival, so that the common people can spend a happy and reassured Spring Festival. During the Spring Festival, we will have some measures, for example, nucleic acid testing and transportation control. The different localities will implement the central requirements. These days, many staff people have been conquering different climatic difficulties to care for the patients and to transport the materials. Despite different obstacles, many people are trying to give up coming back home for the Spring Festival. All of those sacrifices are for the purpose of safety of all. We aim to further cement our outcomes of epidemic control, and we want to thank all of those. Now let's open the floor to Q&A, and please identify yourself before raising the question. The reporter sitting in the first row in the left. In Heilongjiang and Hebei province, we are seeing some confirmed cases in the outskirts, and during the Spring Festival, the rural areas will be under more complex circumstances. So what does the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Areas have done to prevent the transmission during the Spring Festival in rural areas? Thank you for your question. As you said, recently in rural areas, we are seeing some sporadic cases in certain regions. There has been even some cases breaking out collectively. So for the people living in the countryside, they don't have enough awareness of epidemic control. Since it's approaching the Spring Festival, there will be higher flow rate of people in the rural areas. So during the Spring Festival, there may be some traditional customs of visiting relatives and friends during the Spring Festival, or even holding some celebrating ceremonies. There might be some risks of gathering. So the central government, together with the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Areas, have been implementing the instructions at the top layer, and we will actively execute the measures to control epidemic in the rural areas. The first measure is the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Areas has published a document about the epidemic control in rural areas. Also, from the Agriculture Office of the central government, there is an introduction of a working plan for the epidemic control during the winter's time and the Spring Festival included. Secondly, we will promote training and education. You may have noticed that recently we have published an initiative to call for the epidemic control in the rural areas. And this document has attracted attention from the countrymen. We encourage the countrymen to wear their facial masks and wash their hands frequently to enhance their awareness of epidemic control. And thirdly, for those migrant workers, we are also urging them to spend the Spring Festival in the same place they are working right now. That will reduce the mobility of people during the festival. Fourthly, fifthly, we will also try to guarantee the distribution channels in the rural areas by smoothing the distribution channels in the rural areas. We will more efficiently store and dispatch the medical materials needed in the rural areas. In the future, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Areas and the central government will follow strictly the instructions of the Epidemic Control Office of the State Council to fill up the loopholes and take targeted measures in the rural areas. We will look at the different regions, different levels, respectively, with targeted measures. Firstly, the Ministry and the Central Agriculture Office will hold a conference tomorrow about coordinating the epidemic control in rural areas and the food guarantee. In tomorrow's conference, we will have some assignments. Secondly, we will give full play to the role of grassroots organizations in the rural areas to detailize all of those measures locally. And thirdly, we will encourage those migrant workers to spend their Spring Festival in the urban areas where they are working to reduce the flow of people. And fourthly, we will try to change the countryman's habit, and also we will guarantee food supply and reinforce our control of the livestock the rural areas are raising. Next question. The reporter sitting in the first row. Thank you, from news agency. As we know, basically all the colleges have been during the winter vacation, and the schools are asking students to remain where they are on the campuses instead of returning home. So for those students who are still staying on the campuses, what's your management measures? Now let's give the question to Mr. Wang Dengfeng. Not long ago, the news media have been covering about this question. Some universities may ask their students to stay away from the campuses unless it's necessary, but for some others, the universities are located in the intermediate or highly risky areas, so the students are not encouraged to stay where they are and to not leave where they are. And not long ago, in Shijiazhuang City, for the primary and middle school students, they were assigned to return home as early as possible. When the epidemic broke out in Shijiazhuang, many boarding schools, for example, primary and secondary schools, were closed down immediately. No kid was allowed out. But then, since the epidemic is well controlled, those students are free to go, actually. For the universities and colleges, many students were not on campus during the outbreak of the epidemic. They may be doing their internship or passing their examination elsewhere. And also for the college students who are studying in Shijiazhuang but are not a local, they're also encouraged to return home properly. And Shijiazhuang government has arranged some specific transportation to send them back home. They may have to work together with the local educational bureau to pick up those students. So I'm saying that for those students who are kept on the campuses because of the epidemic, different localities will take measures to make sure that once they are eager to come back home, they can. And for some other students who may be remaining on campuses due to their financial difficulties or due to some examinations around the corner, we will take some measures so that those students can stay on campuses and they will get enough services guaranteed. But the precondition is the epidemic is well controlled. As you mentioned, I think basically all the students who are remaining on campuses have received good arrangement already. Next question. In the second row on the right. From the CMG. Even though different localities have clarified that we do not encourage one-size-fits-all policy in epidemic control, but in some localities, they reduce the time required for nucleic acid to be within 3 days instead of 7 days. Some also required the people to stay at home, and some migrant workers are asked to close their door and even lock their doors when they return back home. So, what's your take on that? Thank you for your question. Recently, some localities have seen stringent requirements for the migrant workers returning home, and some areas are taking one-size-fits-all policy. Those measures are causing complaints from those affected. Not long ago, we have learned from the experience, and the Chinese government has made lawfully the policies of epidemic control during the Spring Festival so as to protect people's safety and curb the expansion of the epidemic. We are not aiming to erect more obstacles for the migrant workers. Such unnecessary stringent measures and the one-size-fits-all policies are actually a waste of resources. The different localities must implement the requirements of epidemic control during the Spring Festival scientifically, and we do not allow willfully adding more obstacles unnecessarily, and we will not allow the one-size-fits-all policy. In details, for the other provinces aside from Beijing, they must have the following 6 guarantee. Firstly, they cannot say no to the migrant workers returning home. And secondly, we do not ask the migrant workers already returning home to stay at home. And for those non-key migrant workers coming from the lower risky areas, we do not ask them to have stringent measures of quarantine when they return home. And for those migrant workers who work in the same province, we don't prevent them from coming home. So with those measures and alike, we try to avoid any bias against the migrant workers, and the State Council will monitor the implementation of those measures. If they oppose the instructions, they will be punished and asked to correct their behaviors. Next question. From Hong Kong. Based on the situation in Heilongjiang and Hebei, there is a trend of increasing number of asymptomatic carriers. So what's the reason for that, and what's your suggestion for prevention and control? Mr. Xu Wenbo, thank you for your question. There are 2 conditions for the asymptomatic carriers. One is those who are in their incubation period, and the second type is that they are asymptomatic carriers throughout the way. So for the moment, there are 4 screening methods for them. One is the survey for collective cases. Secondly, the infection source. Thirdly, the close contacts testing. And fourthly, the vast number of nucleic acid testing to test out those asymptomatic carriers. Recently, it is reported that there is a larger number of asymptomatic carriers. That may be because we have stronger capacity of detecting them, so we can very instantly and actively discover the cases, explaining the larger number. Some patients are already detected positive even during their incubation period. And also we have increase the times of nucleic acid testing for people so we can screen out more people. For asymptomatic carriers, they are infective. Since there is no symptom, those people do not know that they can infect others, and they may be infected by others as well. If they are discovered very late, they may cause collective infection during the incubation period, maybe affecting the whole community. So we ask all of us to reduce the risk of being infected through the following measures. First is, do not go to the intermediate or highly risky areas in China or going abroad to reduce the possibility of infection. Secondly, keep a social contact and distance. Avoid joining any gathering. If you have any symptoms like catching a cold or a fever, try to keep a distance from others when going out. And also, if possible, avoid going out. And if you have any symptom, go to the hospital instantly. And wear facial masks when you are out. In the public spaces or even taking the public transportation, you must wear facial masks and have good sanitation. Fourthly, if you have some contact with the confirmed cases, then you must actively receive nucleic acid testing and you coordinate with the sample taking. As required by the employer or the community, you must take the nucleic acid testing accordingly. Most of our provinces are in low risky ranking, but for the asymptomatic carriers, we have already taken the quarantine measures in the hospitals. But I have to stress that the early discovery of the cases is one key step to prevent the transmission, but it requires every one of us to play along. So you must do good prevention and protection job on a daily basis. If you have any symptom, coordinate with the staff members of epidemic control. You are the first person responsible for your own health. Thank you. Next question. From the China Food Safety newspaper, recently we are seeing that some cherries and other imported fruits have been tested positive during the nucleic acid testing. So are those fruits and vegetables tested positive, effective to people, and how to guarantee food safety? Thank you for the question. You made the point. Recently, we have tested the imported fruits and they were positive. As you know, the COVID-19 is transmitted through our respiratory system. It is really going to be infected through the digestive system, whether it's active virus or other viruses. They are prone to be tested positive. So once the food are tested positive, it doesn't mean that they are contagious. It can only prove that those fruits used to be infected by the virus. For this moment, we haven't found any consumer infected by the fruits. Throughout the whole nation, we have done the nucleic acid testing of the imported fruits and vegetables, and the positive ratio is less than 1 per 10,000, and most of those viruses have been found on the packages. So they will not be spread out, and there is very low possibility of an active virus. In the circulation process, we will take more preventative measures, for example, through more frequent nucleic acid testing to avoid the transmission of the virus or the occurrence of any active virus. And the already discovered viruses have been dealt with properly. So the likelihood of consumers being infected by COVID-19 is very low. But even though we have taken stringent measures, our consumers must take certain protective measures. When they are contacting the packages or the food items, they must wash their hands frequently and do not touch your eyes, your nose, your mouth once you have touched those food or the packages. And I want to give another alert to the consumers. You must pay attention to 5 pointers recommended by the World Health Organization. That is, cook your food well and drink clean drinking water and eat safe food, and also have clear division when you're cutting your vegetables and your raw meat. Thank you. Next question. Thank you. From China News Service, many college students are echoing the call by spending the festival on campuses. When we're controlling the epidemic on campuses, how to guarantee that those students can spend a happy festival when they're on campus this year? Mr. Wang Dengfeng? Thank you for the question. Our educational circle is highlighting that issue as well. Many students are echoing the call of the government to spend their Spring Festival on campuses, but some other students are kept on campuses due to some reasons, for example, doing some researches or having some exam. So we are seeing almost a doubling number of students staying on campus this Spring Festival compared to the previous years. And for those group of students, what measures must be taken by the universities and the central government? There are 3 ways. 1, do our best to control epidemic on campuses. Remaining on the campuses will require stringent management, for example, disinfection of the campus and doorkeeping. We also ask our students to avoid any gathering and do good disinfection of themselves. And the universities will prepare sufficient medics on campuses. And also, all of those colleges must be equipped with emergency response measures. Those will be key. The second point I want to make is we must do our best to offer logistics support. Some students spend the Spring Festival on the campuses. This will require us to offer more logistics services to them, for example, sports, cultural activities. That's why the Ministry of Education is giving the policies to universities to have more guarantee services, for example, how to receive their delivered packages, how to do their sports exercises, what about the library. We must guarantee safety in those public places. And also we must have enough attention paid to their needs during the days. Thirdly, we must care for the students. Spring Festival is a traditional festival in China. Everyone is concerned about it. For those students kept on campuses, we not only should highlight logistic support and epidemic control for them, we must also create a happy and festive environment for the students. Some colleges are already on their way. For example, they will provide free meals to them in the first 3 days of the Spring Festival, and there will be also some other activities. For example, the tutors, the teachers might stay online or offline for the students so as to interact with them. They're like 24/7 on call for the students so that the students feel like at home on campuses. So epidemic control first, and then service guarantee, and then caring for the students. We hope that students remaining on campuses could spend a happy festival, even though confronted with the daunting task of epidemic control. We hope they're impressed by this festival. Next question. Thank you. From the Dragon TV, people have to purchase a lot during the Spring Festival. What shall we be reminded of, particularly for the cold chain products? How to guarantee safety of those products? Madam Li Ning, thank you for your question. Since epidemic control has become a daily thing, so during the Spring Festival, there may be some differences. There will be less gathering, for example, eating out of family members and relatives compared to the previous years. And that's why people are purchasing more for their stay-at-home days. So firstly, they must wear facial masks when they are purchasing the products, and when they are out, keep a social distance with others. They must go to the franchised supermarkets to buy the safe products and avoid touching the cold chain products with your naked hands. And also do not touch your eyes, mouth, and nose. If you're purchasing online, go to those e-commerce platforms with higher rating. And when you're receiving your delivered packages, you can use the alcohol to disinfect the packages of the food. And when you are handling the food, you must have good sanitation and wash your hands frequently. Do not use your hands to touch your eyes, nose, and mouth. Like I said, there are also some tips for cooking the food. Next question. From the Farmer's Daily. 3 days later, it will be the beginning of spring. And will the agricultural materials transportation be a problem? How do we guarantee the circulation of those materials during the Spring Festival? Thank you for your question. It's a very good one. We keep saying that spring is the beginning of 1 year. Days later, we will be preparing for the farming activities in the springtime. In southern China, we have already started. And in mid-March, the Yangtze River Delta area will start the farming work. And for northeastern China, they will start planting the rice in April and May. The supply of agricultural raw materials is in full. We have sufficient seeds. We forecast that there will be 3 billion jing of corn. And for rice, we have a supply of 2.4 billion jing, 500 million more than demand. And for beans, we have 1.35 billion jing. For potatoes, we have 11.2 billion jing in supply. All of those will be sufficient to meet demand. And secondly, for fertilizers, pesticides, we also have abundant supply. It is forecasted that in springtime, there will be a demand of about 17.6 million tons, and our supply is over 20 million tons, far over demand. For nitrogen and the other fertilizers, they are all above 1 million tons. For phosphorus fertilizers, we have a balance between supply and demand. As to pesticides, last year the total production was 1.63 tons. That is also sufficient to meet demand. Thirdly, for the agricultural machinery, they are also ready. For the moment, we have maintained and repaired 11 million such machines to guarantee that they are in good condition for the farming activities. We have prepared enough tractors the rice transplanters and other farming machines, there will be around 22 million sets of such equipment to meet the market demand during the spring farming time. We also mobilize those professional agriculture organizations to work for those people in the risky areas where the farmers may find it inconvenient to do their farming activities. We will encourage some people to toil the land on behalf so that the land will not sit idle. The Ministry of Agriculture will continue to do good work in fertilizers and seeds in terms of their transportation and supply. We will urge localities to enhance their coordination with the demand side. For those mid and highly risky areas, we also take some targeted measures to offer point-to-point support. We will take one measure for one case to ensure that those raw materials will not be suspended transportation because of the epidemic. Next question. Thank you. From China Business Network. As to the vaccination, I have 4 questions. Some places are spreading out the policy of vaccination. What is the current status quo? Secondly, since different localities are seeing outbreak of the epidemic, shall we speed up vaccination? Thirdly, when will the vaccination cover the common people? Fourthly, what about the side effects? Mr. Xu Wenbo will take those questions. Thank you. Last December, localities are implementing the central government's policies and arrangements. In different regions, we will implement the vaccination towards the prioritized groups of people in specific areas, particularly the port areas. Now, the reported vaccination number is around 24 million. We fully consider the situation of epidemic control in China to implement vaccination policy. We prevent the imported cases from abroad and avoid rebounded cases in China. That's why we start with the prioritized groups to reduce the pressure on us in epidemic control. In the future, based on the epidemiology features, the vaccination supply, and the epidemic control measures, we will readjust the vaccination policies so that certain people will take the vaccination in an orderly fashion. As to side effects, with our preliminary monitoring, usually there are very low possibilities of side effects. The side effect incidence ratio is in line with our forecast in 2019. For the severe side effects, this vaccination has lower incidence than the other vaccinations marketed since 2019. And the incidence ratio of side effect occurrence is no more than the flu vaccination. So different localities are right now taking records of the side effects once the people receive the vaccination. As reported, the incidence rate of side effects will be adjusted in real time based on such notes. Next question. From China Educational TV. Since it's vacation time in many places, so during the winter vacation, the students may spend their time mostly at home. What's the requirements for the students from the Ministry of Education? Mr. Wang Dengfeng? These questions' answers are almost the same with the previous one about the students kept on campuses. Firstly, we must strictly implement the epidemic control requirements. The primary and secondary school kids staying at home must also follow the rules. For example, wearing facial masks, going out, avoid gathering with people. Every faculty member must abide by the rules. And secondly, the Ministry of Education is entrusting the guiding committee of middle school and primary school to manage the students' ways of living while staying at home. And as to the requirements, they are already published on our official website. Those are the opinions given by experts to the college students and primary and secondary school students. It involves the living habits when they are staying at home, and also some targeted measures and suggestions during the Spring Festival. We hope that those recommendations will be helpful for the kids. Thirdly, for those students staying on campus, we hope to deliver them the message that they can feel at home on campuses. As to the students returning home, they must also feel like on campus. That's why we hope the universities and primary and secondary schools to keep monitoring the students' situation if they return home. There must be daily report. The educational circle must have full grasp of information about those students returning home. And also, we must stay on call to help those students once they need our support in terms of epidemic control. So all in all, whether they are staying on campus or at home, we will care for the students' health and give health tips to the students. We also urge all faculties, wherever they are, to strictly abide by the rules of epidemic control in your certain locality. Thank you. Next question. Thank you. From South Korea, Xinjiang News. Will there be vaccination arrangement during the Spring Festival? What will be the plan if there is? And WHO team has finished their 2 weeks of quarantine and start their investigation in China. Could you inform us about the agenda and schedule of those WHO experts in China? Thank you for the question. During the Spring Festival, such health-related services, including vaccination, will be implemented according to the State Council and according to the local epidemic control requirements. The WHO experts have gotten out of their quarantine since January the 28th and have visited Hubei Provincial Traditional Chinese Medicine Hospital and Wuhan Hospital to communicate with the patients. They also visited 人民至上生命至上 exhibition. China has already negotiated with the WHO experts about their future schedule. Under the condition of abiding by the local epidemic control requirements, they will visit some other organs, for example, the CDC branches, the scientific institutes, or the food market, so as to do a joint work of COVID-19 researches. And China will be open and transparent and responsible and continue our cooperation with WHO so as to prevent any potential outbreak of the COVID-19 in the future and contribute to safeguarding people's health. Next question. Thank you. From Fengmian News. In some trains, we are seeing some cases, including asymptomatic carriers already. So for those people returning home, how can we guarantee epidemic control on the transportation ways? Mr. Xu Wenbo. Thank you for the question. Firstly, We don't encourage people to commute during the Spring Festival unless necessary. If they do, please do good protection work. You must pay close attention to the epidemic situation in your destination. Pay attention to the notifications sent by the Transportation Bureau. And also, if you don't have fever or other suspicious symptoms, you can return home. If you do, you must take the transportation to go to the hospitals. If you drive yourself, you must guarantee good ventilation of your car. And if you go to public space on your way driving, you must disinfect your hands. If the other hitchhikers in your car or other family members in your car have some symptoms, for example, fever or cold, guarantee enough ventilation and disinfection work done in your car, and avoid close contact with them. When you reach your destination, those suspicious people must go to the hospital instantly, and your car must be disinfected thoroughly. Instead, if you take the public transportation returning home, wear your facial mask throughout the whole commuting time, and avoid taking down your facial masks when you are having your meals, and try to change your facial masks regularly. And also, secondly, in the public transportation, you must work together with the port or a station to do good registration work or quarantine work. When you are queuing in line, keep a social distance of 1 meter from others. Try to avoid gathering with the other passengers. And thirdly, guarantee sanitation of your hands. Do not touch willfully other things. If you want to cough or sneeze, use a handkerchief to cover your nose and hands, and keep a social distance from others. In the public transportation, if you have any fever or cough, contact the staff members immediately. Keep your facial masks on and take a rest in the designated quarantine rooms. When you reach your destination, go to the designated hospital for diagnosis. You must leave your contact information to the other close contacts during the transport. Since arrival, you must also implement the local requirements of epidemic control to avoid any gathering or visits. Thank you. Next question. From People's Daily. There will be less gathering during the Spring Festival this year. More people are cooking and enjoying meals at home. So what tips can you give us about food safety and how to guarantee our nutrition? Madam Li Ning. Thank you. Like you said, during the Spring Festival, we must guarantee food safety and nutrition during the Spring Festival. In addition to the epidemic control measures, we must also avoid food poisoning. We usually buy a lot of food for the festival, and we cook a lot. When you are storing, cooking, or purchasing the food, improper handling ways may lead to food poisoning. So I encourage the consumers to guarantee the following three. 1, the raw materials. 2nd, the processing. And thirdly, the storage. For raw materials, buy fresh raw materials in the big supermarkets or shopping malls. Do not buy food from unknown sources. And also as to processing, when you are cooking, guarantee that the food are well cooked and avoid cross-infection of the raw food and cooked ones, including the classification of the containers of different types of food. And guarantee your hands are clean while you're cooking. Guarantee that you don't cook too much, and there will be more remains of the food if not. And if there are some remains, keep them in the refrigerator. Do not keep your remains on the tables for over 2 hours. And when you want to heat up the food in the next meal, try to guarantee that they are well cooked. As to nutrition, we must have a balance of food. Diversify your food, including the vegetables and the meat. Eat enough milk, beans, vegetables, and fruits. Different types of food offer different nutrition, so diversify and balance. Avoid eating too much. Reduce the input of salt and oil, and try to give up smoking. And also we encourage you to rest enough and exercise enough to keep your body weight. And we also encourage the usage of the shared chopsticks and avoid waste of food. Thank you. Next question. From Nongshiwang. Recently, due to the cold waves, we are seeing a rebound of epidemic. In some places, the fresh products are seeing a fluctuation of prices. So during the Spring Festival, can we guarantee the supply of the agricultural products? Mr. Mao, thank you for the question. We are all concerned about this question. The supply guarantee of agricultural products matters to every household. The Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Areas has given top priority to the supply guarantee of agricultural products. Now, as to the status quo, I think we can guarantee the supply. We're seeing a rebound of pig production. For the livestock, vegetables, and fruits, we also have sufficient storage. We believe that during the Spring Festival, we will have the situation looking up. For vegetables and fruits, our capacity of supply is enhanced. According to the ministry, now the area of vegetables in the field is around 80 million. On an average, the harvesting amount of vegetables per week is around 14 million tons, also having a year-on-year increase. 14 million tons are equalized to 3 gin of food for every person in China per day. Last year, we had harvest of fruits. Our storage of apples is very high. As to oranges and other fruits, we have enough supply in the market, and the price is stabilized. As to livestock, like pigs, since 2020, because of the market drivers and the policy incentives, our pig production is resumed rapidly. And the African pig COVID-19 was controlled, so market expectation has picked up. In February this year, there will be a 25% increase of pig production compared to last year. In the future, there will be a loose supply as well. During the Spring Festival, the chicken supply will also reach a historical high. For eggs, chicken, there will be sufficient supply in the market. It is forecasted that around the Spring Festival, there will be an increasing supply of beef and lamb, and the prices of the two will also be stabilized. As to aquatics, the main fishing provinces like Hubei, Jiangxi, Guangdong, and Fujian provinces, they have been conquering the difficulties caused by the epidemic, and the fishing production is also stabilized. We believe there will be also sufficient supply of aquatic products during the Spring Festival, and we can also guarantee the quality of the aquatic products. In general, as we know, every Spring Festival is the high season for the food. Usually, before the Spring Festival, prices will rise up, but after the Spring Festival, it will shoot down. This year, because of the festival, some products are seeing a seasonal high in prices, but it is also consistent with the rules previous years. Also, since we are impacted by the epidemic, we encourage people to spend the festival locally. So we predict that in the large and medium-sized cities, there will be higher consumption of the food during the Spring Festival, and our ministry has already had a plan for it. For the next step, we will work together with certain departments and localities to keep monitoring the influence of the climatic conditions and the epidemic with our contingency plans. We will guarantee production of the food and enhance the coordination between production and consumption. We will have good management of the storage of food and circulation of food. We will guarantee that the supply of food during the Spring Festival will not be undermined during the Spring Festival, and our common people will not miss one meal. Last question, please. Thank you. From Hongxin News. In the first half of 2020, most of students spent their days at home, so many parents and students are concerned. Can we resume the classes efficiently after the Spring Festival? What's your forecast for students returning to school after the Spring Festival? Mr. Wang Dengfeng. As to the spring semester, according to the requirement of the Ministry of Education, we believe that the schools will be open safely and on schedule. Mostly, the majority of schools have already made their plans of vacation. But considering the epidemic, we must do three things. Firstly, work together with the National Health Commission, who is making the new version of epidemic control on campuses. Now they are making the technical plan for the fall semester. For example, when the students are on their road, or when they are in the gymnasiums or the stadiums, what are the requirements? And now the National Health Commission is revising the plan for the spring semester. I believe that this document will be finished very soon, so when the schools are open, those schools will have a new technical plan to conform to. Secondly, we ask different localities and schools to keep analyzing and monitoring the epidemic situation. In the autumn, in the winter, we are seeing sporadic outbreak of cases. Today's presser is also about following such an sporadic occurrence of the epidemic, and the localities are already analyzing and even predicting the epidemic. So by following this situation, we will readjust our requirements for the opening of schools in the spring semester. Thirdly, we also require different localities and schools to prepare themselves ahead of the spring semester. For example, the plan of epidemic control, the materials for epidemic control, they must all be ready. And also they must analyze the epidemic situation locally. Under special circumstances, they may have to open their schools in different batches. In the intermediate or highly risky areas, the schools might be opened later. There will be a postponement because, after all, we have to guarantee safe semester. So we have good preparation, and we also require localities and schools to have an alignment of online schooling and offline schooling. If necessary, we will also restart our online classes. But if we can open the schools, we will give out the information immediately to the students. For this moment, we have a very clear policy from the ministry about opening the schools in the spring semester. But if there is any emergency, we will readjust our plans. Thank you all. Today, in the presser, our experts have briefed you about the epidemic control during the Spring Festival. For the concerned questions of the media and the public, we will continue our communication in the future. This is the end of today's presser. Thank you.